Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 56 of Syncing with ServiceNow. I'm your host, Fred Reynolds, and with me today is Senior Solution Architect, Kristen McDonald. Kristen, how are you doing today?
Doing great. How are you, Fred?
Perfect. Anything interesting going on?
But there's always interesting things, always new, fun projects to play with. Yeah.
Perfect. And I'm sure that's on the coding side for you, not like me where I build stuff, decks and stuff. Well, as always, just make sure I remind everybody that we are a full ServiceNow implementation and consulting shop here. Actually, we do everything with ServiceNow, build, resell. So any needs that you may have around implementation, consulting, staff log, anything you need around ServiceNow and supporting that, we're able to do that here for you today. So, Kristen, I know you brought a blog for us to discuss a little bit today. Definitely going to lean heavily on you. This is right up your alley. The name of the blog is How to Identify, Sponsor, and Scale the Right Agentic Use Cases. So tell me a little bit about why you brought this blog, and really I'm probably going to need you to walk us through a good bit of it.
Absolutely. So we have a lot of customers who are right now at that stage in their processes where they've implemented the out-of-box features in ServiceNow in terms of agentic workflows and AI tools, and they're at a point where they're really wanting to take it to the next level. And that plays right into agentic use cases, agentic workflows. So this blog actually has some really great points that I haven't seen a lot out there. So, but definitely valid points for the majority of them. So there's a couple places where I might have a slight disagreement in opinion, but we can definitely talk through that. But it definitely makes some great points along the way. Yeah.
That's good. We definitely want to hear that. Want to hear your opinions. You've been doing and working in ServiceNow for quite a long time now, so you should probably start pumping out your own blogs. But where do we want to start here? So I haven't previewed this. I see it says good versus great. What separates the two? So what is that referring to?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of the good versus great, it's just looking at kind of standard selection criteria for your agentic use cases versus kind of what he's covering in the article, which is kind of going up beyond the basics. Okay. Here at Syntegra, we do have kind of a framework, as you know, for evaluating agentic use cases and AI use cases with our customers. And we do use some of that basic criteria because it is kind of table stakes at this point. But we actually also use some of the criteria that he talks about in this blog. So I'm excited to get into some of the details of that. Yeah.
Where do we start?
Well, the first section is, does it compound? And I think this is probably one of the more exciting arguments in this blog because it's something I'm not sure I've ever heard anybody else talk about, but it's a really, really interesting discussion. So generally speaking, when we're looking at a roadmap for a customer around AI and use cases there, we'll identify the pain points, we'll identify the areas that have the ROI and the foundational data to support it and prioritize and make decisions based off of some of that criteria. What this individual is actually arguing is that, yes, that's great, you need to do that. But in addition, look at where the agents can kind of build off of each other. So you can build. The example he uses here is take a triaging agent. Yes, that triaging agent is going to take workload off of your people, off of your staff, but it's also giving you data. And then you can use that data to leverage for the next AI agent and just keep building on top of that. So it's a really interesting way to look at it, something a little different. Yeah.
So is it saying that's the use cases that are most applicable these days is ones that can compound and build off of each other and continue to grow?
I don't know that that's necessarily the largest priority when developing a roadmap. It's certainly a consideration. It's a factor to consider. Yeah.
I certainly could see that because depending on where you're starting, let's just say it's ITSM and it's doing a service desk and you're starting with trying to figure out how to start reduce some of that workload, you can easily see how that stuff can compound pretty easily into doing more and more activities around that because there's a lot of things into solving one incident or a case that you may have that has multiple aspects of that, and maybe getting the root cause of that issue and fixing that may be one, but there's a write-up, there's a follow-through, there's knowledge articles, so all that. Like you said, that's how it compounds from the way my mind's reading this or thinking through it. So that's a compounding use case of agentic workflow.
Absolutely. And something that we're just starting to see, really. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm definitely seeing that with us working with our current clients and start to introduce some of this. It is seeing how everybody's brain starts going wild of what it can do and then, what's going to be the best ROI from that. So does it sit in a workflow or at the edge?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is something we definitely include in our own assessments. It really kind of plays into the ROI of the agent, but his argument is more about location versus kind of the or the efficiency numbers underneath of it. But when he says the edge, he's talking about things that are kind of ancillary agents. They may get kicked off every so often, but they're not core to your processes. They're not core to your workflows. So when we do our ROI analysis, of course, we're looking for those core things because those are the things that, one, are pretty easily measured. You already know what it's costing you now and how much time it's taking right now. So you can evaluate that ROI pretty well. And two, it's really going to make the most impact because if it's core and something that's repeatable and happens every day, every single order or a specific type of ticket, you're really going to get the most bang for your buck. Because if it's just a little ancillary thing that gets called every so often, it's not going to give you much ROI. So I think that definitely comes into play with the ROI calculations, but it's a slightly different take on it. Yeah.
Definitely make a lot of sense, especially depending on when you're trying to get the masses quick, right? To get that ROI, take the biggest pain points, the things you spend the most time with, and getting those out there. All right, perfect. Number 3, it says, does it help humans to do more of what humans are good at? It's interesting.
It really is. And I think a lot of people are looking at some of these AI agents to completely take over a job. And that's actually the use case he declares here. An agent that does what Jane does is his first example. And the second one is an agent versus an agent that gives Jane the context she needs so that she can save time in doing what she does. I definitely, in most use cases, recommend the second. There's quite a few reasons for that. First off, you're going to get a lot better adoption if you're not trying to replace people's jobs, right? Your users are going to push back if you're trying to fully replace them. We've seen that time and time again. But also AI can hallucinate. We know that. So if you've got an agent that's going out and pulling information, summarizing it, and giving your fulfiller the actual sources of that data, then they can go in and verify. They can give it a human look over, make sure everything looks good. You're still saving money because this one person who might have done 10 tickets a day before is now able to do 50 tickets a day. But the agent is actually doing some of the legwork and going and grabbing that information and summarizing it so that it's faster for them to do their jobs.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely see the movement happening. We're starting to see a lot more agents go into production, being utilized. But we saw this, we've talked about this multiple times on whether it be a webinar or this podcast, even that, people introduced very quickly in the beginning and they saw, okay, that's not quite the way to do that because we need to have some human intervention. So I'm definitely the biggest fan of, yes, let the agents work, but there's got to be those stops in there, especially if it's going to be compounding stops to say, is this the next step? Is this where I should go? Is this right? And to your point, where somebody may have been serving 100 cases in a day, that's a lot actually, but whatever it may be, they can now do, a lot less of those more accurate, or actually a lot more of those accurate and faster to it. So,
yeah, absolutely.
okay.
And it also gives you a feedback loop for your agents because if you've got a person reviewing what they're coming back with, they can score the quality and then you have more data to go off of. You know where you need to make some tweaks. So, yeah.
Indeed. All right, this next section talks about table stakes. So what is he saying here?
Yeah, so these are the basics that everybody kind of considers. It's foundational for agents. First thing is the data. If you don't have the data in your system, it has nothing to train on. It has nothing to reference.
Mm-hmm.
There's also, the question of system of record, garbage data in, garbage data out. We've known that forever, right? That's always been kind of the tagline of data warehouse, but it's also becoming the tagline of AI agents. If you don't have good data, they can't operate off good data. So these are things that, we've known for a while, but it's kind of compounding now that you've got autonomous things operating in your platform. Yeah.
It does. It seems like it's actually starting to slow some of the people who are taking the steps to move towards AI because they're worried about these table stakes of the data being where it needs to be in correct data in the first place. We see that early on adoption of people maintaining their CMDB, trusting their CMDB, and taking the next steps in event management and building on that. Same thing there where you're seeing people, I can't move forward with event management and this because I don't trust my CMDB. I got to get that fixed first. Now we're seeing that here. They want to trust their data before they can move forward and putting these agents in place.
And where before it was the CMDB, now it's leaning more heavily on the knowledge base articles and the resolution notes and comments in your tickets because that's the natural language data that AI feeds on.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was going to ask you that. So that's kind of neat. I was going to wonder, but introducing AI, so you're doing a lot with our clients around AI and the agents. We actually made some custom agents and stuff. Like, what is the main thing that needs to be in place? It says table stakes here. I understand data, but you just mentioned like knowledge articles. I guess it's, what are going to be the LMMs it's going to use? I mean, there's probably a criteria to make sure you know what's there. Are they foundationally strong enough to start doing AI? Is that what you're looking for?
Absolutely. And it really does depend on the use cases. Certain use cases need more data and different types of data. So it's really a matter of which area you're trying to target. But think of it as if you're thinking of a brand new human who's coming into your platform, right? You've hired a new employee, you're onboarding them, you're trying to teach them your processes and things. If you have good documentation and good onboarding for that person, they're going to be a lot more successful quickly. And AI agents are a lot of times like brand new employees. They don't have a lot of context. They don't store a lot of context about your processes. So it's like they're kind of doing it from scratch almost every time. But if you have the right context in your knowledge base articles and in those resolution notes, it can go reference that and utilize it.
So here's an interesting one. So it talks about sponsorship, pick someone who will lean in. Now, I know this has got to be incredibly important because when I sit there and look at a lot of the clients that we're talking with, or even some new ones, and they're talking about AI, a lot of the responses are, especially some smaller ones, our CEO just said we gotta do AI, right? We're going to get left out if we don't do it. There's no real what do you want us to do? It's just that we got to do it. So go do it. Go figure that out, right? That seems very dangerous to me, just to go figure it out. So this talks about pick someone who will lean in. So tell me about how important that is.
Absolutely. So I think there's a couple different factors to this. The first factor is really helping customers identify what is the right project for AI. So like you said, they get those, large scale initiatives. Hey, we've got to implement AI and we've got to implement it fast. Well, some things shouldn't be AI and some things really are a great fit for AI. So working with a partner like Syntegra who has frameworks and has experience with these things, we can kind of guide you through that process so that you're not just kind of throwing things at the wall, right? So that's the first thing is identifying the right projects. So some of our road mapping initiatives can really help with that, the workshops that we do with customers.
And even
And then
before
the
you get to the roadmap, sometimes it's an education on the different types of AI and what AI projects you could best fit into where you sit at. So I do see that the education around what to do and then picking the right first steps into AI to make sure it's adopted and successful. Okay, sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Absolutely. No, that's a great point and good to get that out before we move on because the next piece really is kind of a different factor, but it's something we really see this with every project. It's not just an AI specific issue, but when you don't have a solid sponsor on a project, and it's really two things, you need a solid executive sponsor, somebody who is able to and has the authority to drive forward on the project, to make final decisions, to unblock things, to help team members reconcile when they need to. And also having somebody with boots on the ground, somebody in those workshops, in those meetings with the authority to make the decisions, that can really make a big difference in driving a project forward. And I know you and I have worked on a really large project together where that came into play.
It's
Yeah,
extremely important, even though ours is a massive scale, which they don't get too much bigger than just like redoing everything like we did. But we saw the same challenges. You're always going to have those things that have to unblock. The fostering of the teams, the fostering organization, to making sure you're speaking upwards and downwards to make sure everybody's on the same page is extremely important. You
yeah,
cannot afford to lose momentum. We do a lot of, I would say, smaller projects now, Kristen. Right? We just do it a single application or for a new out for a new group. So we still run into the same thing around it could be adoption issues if it's not put in correctly and address some of the pain points. But all that really matters, like you said, coming to the identifying what you're going to do, having a
mm,
project team that you identify blockers, and then you have people to kind of unblock those. And so those sponsorships on that customer side, client side, that can unblock those challenges, get the right people, make decisions. We've seen projects get paralyzed because somebody's not willing to make decisions. Those are really painful things on both sides. But really trying to foster and understand what's the goal, what's the mission, what we're trying to accomplish. I definitely see that in the AI space because if you're going to do something like this, you need to think it through, right? And then sponsor it in a way that it goes into production and you see it through, even through the initial phase of getting it out there, understand where maybe it needs to be tweaked and fixed, but stick with it long enough to see is it going to really produce what you need it to do. And it takes that. Somebody's got to be sold out to get in there and do it.
absolutely. And AI really is a cultural shift, right? It impacts your people a lot more than most technological projects. So it
Mhm.
really does need a strong sponsor who can communicate well, and really kind of reassure the employees, but also show them the value and communicate why we're doing this, right? Yeah.
Mhm. So this next one says scaling. Start with one, expand from value. That's got to be extremely important because I have definitely seen some people go all in and say we're going to just start blowing AI out everywhere, and that just has to be chaotic. I'm definitely starting a little slower with a one crawl, walk, run approach. It's got to be
Mhm.
more successful. So is that what it's mentioned here? How you start and expand?
It is. And I would say this is where there's some things I agree with and there's some things I disagree with in the statements that are made here. This individual is arguing that you just need to pick one use case. Don't look at anything else. Just pick one use case. And then when you get that one right, then you can start building off of it. I do disagree with that a little bit because I think a lot of AI projects are not really having the impact that they need to have because people aren't taking the time to evaluate the ROI and priorities up front.
Sure.
So I do think that needs to happen. But then once you've taken that time and identified the correct use case, and then you have a little backlog of use cases that you can go back to, then yes, focus on the first one, focused on the highest priority, highest ROI, get that one working well, and then you can build from there and reevaluate as needed. But I do think that upfront work is still needed. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely agree. And it talks about using a SMART methodology in here and a few other things that it's pointed out. So yeah, I get it. All right. So this could be the last section here. It says, so what is this here? So what would I do differently knowing what I know now?
Yeah. So just kind of a synopsis. So again, identify the correct use cases, make sure you've got the right sponsor and tackle one at a time. Get the first one working really well, get it solid before you move on to the next. So basically lessons learned. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Well, that's the end of the blog that we do have, Kristen. So I don't want to just end it on that. So what I would ask is anything you want to add, anything we want to discuss a little bit further around, that pertains to this blog and kind of introducing AI right now?
So again, I think a lot of companies have AI initiatives. A lot of companies don't know where to start with their AI initiatives. And that's where a partner like Syntegra can really come into play. We've got frameworks, we've got use cases, we've got experience with real world clients, and a long history with ServiceNow, well over a decade with ServiceNow for all of our architects and developers. So we can really sit down with you, help craft that roadmap, make sure that what you're implementing actually gets you that value. So,
Yeah. And I would say too, people are looking at AI across everything. Right now, this is a ServiceNow, dedicated podcast. We're talking about ServiceNow. As Integra, we go beyond ServiceNow when it comes to AI. And some people want to understand what can be done in ServiceNow, what cannot be done in ServiceNow. We have an AI Accelerate package at Integra that gives you it gives you some hours to apply towards that. It can be applied towards knowledge, understanding, like we talked about. Kristen's done a great job educating a lot of our clients as to how AI, what's there today, what's available in and out of ServiceNow. So we know what's available inside of ServiceNow with the current releases. What are we seeing being adopted very well? And outside of ServiceNow, if you have other areas to focus on, we can do both. So we have Accelerate packages in both places outside of ServiceNow and ServiceNow to help someone very quickly get started. So if you listen to this and you want to get started with some AI capabilities within your platform, please reach out to us. But Kristen, thank you for your time today. Thank you for bringing the blog to us. And with that, unless you have anything else, I'll let you go.
that's it. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. Thank you. Have a good day.